So today I'm going to challenge you to think differently. We have a topic that it can be done in so many numerous ways that everybody who was going to present on this topic would present something different. It's not often that we get topics that can be presented in multiple different ways with different amounts of information, and yet they're all still remain accurate. So today, what I'm going to challenge you to do is to think a little bit differently from probably what you maybe normally would. It's going to require for you to really think. All right, here's our agenda for today. We're going to answer these 5 questions. How does the instructor ignite Gen Z's interest in the subjects that are being taught? What is the need? What is needed to stimulate Generation Z's curiosity and intrinsic drive, motivation? Does assessment play a role in any of this? And if so, what and how? And then how does one begin with all the things that we're going to learn today? And then I'll provide a few examples towards the end. Okay, so describe your class words to me. If you'll take this moment to go ahead and put it in the chat and let me know just with one word, if you really need to, then up to 3 words, how would you describe your classroom? Take a moment to think about it and then let us know. How would you describe your classroom? Early, like that, early, large, see that, engaged, okay, great. Lab oriented, short, remote, fun, it's a nice one. Tired. I have one of those this semester too. It's a 6 p.m. class. They are tired. Thoughtful, interactive, chaotically fun, communicative, relaxed. Here's my question. My next question to you would be, is that your goal? Right? So when you sit down and think about what you want for your classroom, is the word you just selected, is that your goal? Right? Sometimes we have something in our classrooms that we wish was different. Sometimes we like what we're doing in our classroom, but it wasn't our original goal. Okay, so I'm gonna give you one other thing to think on and reflect here. Would your students agree with the terminology you just selected? If they were to describe your classroom in 3 words, they come up with the same words, with synonyms to those words. Yeah, so would the majority of your students agree? It is hard to keep everyone happy because it's really not possible, right? I mean, we're humans. It's not You're not going to ever have 100%. So in our minds, oftentimes when we're planning our classes, we have the ideal student in mind, and we prepare our classroom for the ideal student. And sometimes we hit that just right, and we have a great semester. And then sometimes it's like every day we're trying to beg and pull and plead and literally drag them into the education arena. So I get students are not motivated. So next question, and then we'll have a summary for all these questions. What rubric expectation did you use to assess the last question? So you're evaluating your student, you're evaluating that they're engaged some, not engaged, sleepy, tired. What rubric or expectation did you use to make that assessment? Okay, so we see participation points. Participate when they ask, survey how they did in class. Nobody's asking questions, their interactions or lack thereof, or they're on the computer, like with their devices open. I know I struggle with that too. Their devices are open. So what we're going to talk about today is how we can address some of these things, because when our students don't speak, it doesn't mean they're not engaged. It doesn't mean they're not listening all the time, right? When their devices are open, it doesn't always mean they're distracted, even though the tendency and the opportunity is certainly there. And it's likely distracting someone around them if it's not distracting them. However, in today's world with accommodations, we're going to have laptops in our classrooms. And when they graduate and go to their employers are going to have the same problem. Let's talk about what types of activities you intentionally infuse into your class time. The reason why is we have the capacity to learn as a gift. The ability to learn is a skill. Okay, so there are, I have children that are on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum, and I have one child who, they're all ADHD. I have one who is severe ADHD. It's like she's constantly hyper. They have to be taught to learn. That is a skill. And once they've learned that, it's like you don't read till you're 8, but once you learn it, it's like it just opens these doors, and it's just boom, 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 boom. It's just constant learning once you're there. But we do have students that need to be taught how to learn in our classroom, not just in education in general, not just in college, but in our classroom with the tools that we're providing them and with the content that we have designed for them. And the person who needs to do that is I. You need to do that the first week of your classroom. So, because at the end of the day, learning is a choice. Students make the choice whether or not they arrive to your classroom, pay attention, engage, participate, and walk away with excellent A level knowledge for that day or C average level knowledge for the day. And sometimes maybe even less lower than that. So what types of activities do you run in your classroom, even if you've only run it one time, right? If you've only done it one time, or if it's something you do consistently, what do you do that is intentionally designed and infused into your class time? So we have a Kahoot, excellent games. Gen Z loves games. We have small group discussion, okay? Collaboration posts, small group activities, debriefs, several folks using Kahoots, word clouds, review quizzes. So the review quizzes, are you doing this publicly or do you just let them see their scores? Or y'all do them all together as a class? And 100% remote, you still have activities that can be done, they just take a very different form. So if you'll notice, as we have gone through this, I'll go back and show you here. At this slide is titled Agenda. I'm letting you know this is what we're going to do today. This slide is titled Engagement. I'm letting you know I'm just trying to get your attention, get you to give me something in the chat, which as teachers we're usually really good at this. This slide is letting you know I'm actually seeking information. I want to learn something about you. So I have a purpose for the things I'm asking, and I am notifying you as the learner what I'm using that information for, why I'm asking those questions. The next slide I go to is also titled With the Intent, not just the topic. Gen Z especially appreciates this. They want to find purpose and they want to know what your purpose is or the value. They need to find value. Why do they need to know this later? One of the things that is happening right now in academia with Gen Z is they're often taking their classes later. They come to college and they start taking the major classes, the things that they're interested in. And our curriculum is designed to allow them to do this, and it's happening across the nation. But they're going in and they start those major classes. And so I have seniors in some of my more elective type courses that are not necessarily required, but it's a business course. They show up in that elective as seniors because they're not an HR major, they're taking the HR elective, or they're taking the principles of management because they didn't have to have it to get into some of those higher level courses with their double majors and the way the curriculum is designed. It's turning out, when I first heard this, I was like cringing. Oh my goodness, I need them to have that liberal arts. I need them to have that experience before they get to me. And in reality, what we're finding is the students are enjoying their core classes. They're paying more attention to all these liberal arts focus because they value it more. They're older. They have more experience. They already have some knowledge sets they can apply to those other discipline areas. So how does an instructor ignite their interest, right? We're going to learn who they are, talk a little bit about them in a minute. But first, we're going to go through some basics. How does someone excite you? How do you become interested in a subject matter you do not have natural interest with? So let's think about it. When we're saying how do we ignite and incite interest in the Generation Z, we're not talking about the folks who show up loving our subject matter. Those people are engaged all anyways. We want to know, how do we get that disinterested person engaged? You didn't want to learn it. How did they get you interested? So what we have is facts, okay? So you're saying you like to know facts, subject area. We want things that are not interesting, making it relatable, academic, clinical experience. So we do find videos often work, stories, personal accounts. Those are all exceptional for any classroom setting. So that's a great example. And we already talked about what made those memorable. Most likely it was the people, the personal stories that really made that memorable. The video, the interactiveness of it, helped you engage, and then it became memorable because of the actual experiences, and the content was made useful to you because you can go back and apply it in your classroom. So it gave you information, something to excite you about your own life and about your personal career. And that is the key to how we get to most of our students. And Generation Z puts a new slant on some of that. But if we can relate it to their life, their personal experience, or to their future, that career, then the storytelling is engaging, the videos are engaging. But what makes it memorable, what makes it a great experience, what makes them want to show up next week with just as much excitement is that application to their personal life. So some keys to doing this are three things: lifelong learner, engagement, and knowing your audience. We've heard these terms extensively, right? Know your audience. You need to know your audience. It's the number one thing you need to do for marketing, for sales. We need to engage everybody if we're doing a presentation or for a teaching. And one of the most important things a person can learn in their life is lifelong love for learning, because you're going to learn until the day you're not here to do any more learning. Right? So those are the three keys. Now, for this, I have a whole separate presentation for these three that I have done before, but I got two of the key points for today: creativity and stop telling them things. Right? So our Generation Z does not want to be told anything. They want to discover. See, if you look through, you can see this in all different parts of the market, other industries. It's not just education. One of the examples I've used in class before is the diamond industry. You know, when my parents were buying diamonds, it was all about luxury, and how expensive the diamond was, how much it cost, what brand it was, where it came from. When I buy diamonds, I'm still more along those lines, right? Today, Gen Z, the millennials, they're not into how much it cost or the brand name where it came from. They're much more interested in the experience. So in order for diamonds to still be out there and to sell them to a generation of people who are waiting longer to get married, or choosing not to get married, or choosing things other than diamonds for their engagement sets, the diamond industry had to get creative. And so now you have an experience. Diamond purchasing can be wrapped around: where are the diamonds from? What's the history of that diamond? De Beers, one of the larger sellers of diamonds, actually offers excursions. You can go see the mine where your diamond was originally came from. You can go follow the path of the diamond from the mine, to the States, and go see where it was cut and where these things were done. So, that's just one of the ways that many years ago, when this transition started first being noticed, some markets really caught on to that. It's about the experience. If you don't think of your classroom as an experience, let today be the day that you never see it as anything else. Never again see your classroom as anything other than an experience. It's like a sitcom show. It is something that is there that your students are experiencing. Whether it's fun, funny, boring, all of those things you can adjust if you think of it more as an experience. I don't want to encourage entertainment, right? We're not there to entertain. We're here to educate. But in some ways, we need to be entertaining, especially with a generation of people who prefer entertainment and are used to it in quite very many aspects of their life. So we have sustainability, environment, lab-grown diamonds, absolutely. Anything you teach, if you can relate it to sustainability, if you can relate it to social responsibilities, social justice, Generation Z will be interested. Their ears will tune in because those things are very important to them. Creativity is something that businesses right now need. It is one of the things that just about every career is looking for. We've heard, critical thinking for decades now. We've heard decision making for decades. Creativity is something that's kind of hard to sell in business. So I spend a little bit of time at the beginning of the semester pointing out how much creativity there really is inside business and the world of business, especially if you are desiring to achieve those top tier positions and titles. They're there because they have the ability to create and to have original creativity with their solutions and ideas. So intuitiveness, intuitive, but you can use different terminology, but creative is something that we need to foster and encourage in our students. So what is needed to stimulate them with curiosity? Intrinsically motivation. We cannot convince, whether you have 10 students, 40 students, or 300 in your class, you cannot take on the job and responsibility of convincing them that they need to learn, or that they want to learn, or that what you're relaying to them is important. Right? We cannot take that task onto ourselves. But what we can do is figure out how to motivate them to intrinsically want to be there and want to learn. So, what is needed? Let's look at what our keys are here. We have a couple. Deep, not surface learning. If you want to keep folks here in curiosity, you want them intrinsically motivated to know more. Drive them deeper than what they're used to getting. They find value in that. Generation Z will find value in there being more information than what they were expecting for the day. So challenge them, give them deeper information. Skills versus knowledge. Generation Z does not value the knowledge from the textbook. Right? They've lived with Google at their fingertips their whole life. They can literally go learn the textbook and collect the class for most courses, not all courses, but for many. And so they find a value in skills, not in the knowledge alone, right? They need the knowledge for the skills, but knowledge alone they can do by themselves. So they're going to find value in your class when you're providing a skill. A lot of times knowledge is the skill, but you need to explain that. You need to explain how it becomes a skill in the career fields. So, that's understanding things. That's reading and understanding. They can do that on their own. They should have mastered that process in high school. So we start with application for all of our class discussions. Video presentations can be submitted, podcasts can be submitted. We have skills learned from doing the creative assignments. Yes, and having them reflect, giving them a reflection assignment so that they have to determine what they learned instead of you telling them what they learned, is they find value in that. They surprise themselves. And when they surprise themselves or they see value or relation to a career or to their future, then they will show up wanting more. Transfer those skills to their life or career. That's where they find purpose. Generation Z is very aware of money, so they know they're here and paying for this, and they see it as a service. They really do. They see it as a service. And just as they'll tip well for overpriced coffee at Starbucks, they do not tip well for restaurant food that had mediocre service. They'll tip up to what is expected, right? That $15 an hour, but not necessarily go over that. They are very concerned and aware of what's happening around them. So if you show them purpose and providing good service, then they will come back wanting more. A way to do this is reflection. It's one of the more simple ways is to do guided reflections. So you cannot ask a question that just says, tell me how today went, right? That's not guided. Way too open of a question. You can say, what did you learn today? That's quite common. I often will ask more directly narrowed questions, things like, what was one thing that stood out to you? What was one thing about today's class that was surprising to you? So try to just get them thinking a little deeper, but reflections with purpose, some way that you're getting them to discover for themselves what just took place today. So we don't want to tell them, we want to lead them to discovery, right? So you cannot be too narrow focused. If you get way down deep into like specific, tell me about the brain cycle. Tell me about the urea cycle, right? You're just asking for knowledge tips, bullet points. That is not of value to them. They could have done that and taken those notes at home alone. So they're looking for you to, when you're doing guided reflections, you want to give them purpose in what they learned and lead them to it. Let them discover it. You just point them in the right direction. All right. So what does Z do well? So these are the things. I'm going to go ahead and put them up. They stand up for what they believe in. They're very passionate. They're creative. They love fun and entertainment, especially TikTok. We're going to move forward to the next one. I'm going to make sure we get this today. We have here all these things. They are digital natives. They are very aware of diversity. They've lived with inclusion in their classroom since they were 3, 4 years old. So inclusion is something they expect to see. They're really good with that. They're independent. They have entrepreneurial spirits and they are not afraid to start. I have more students who own businesses in my class now than I've ever had before. They're debt aware. They're also aware of their time and they're quite efficient. They do not want to waste their time. So they don't want to be in class. If they do not have to be in class and they're not finding it engaging, they don't want to be there. It's a waste of their time. A lot of that comes from their extreme need for work-life balance. So Generation Z would prefer their full work week be 30 hours. They've already gotten us industry-wide down to about 37-ish, 38. But overall, 30 hours they think is perfectly acceptable for a full work week. They want that work-life balance and they see the time in your classroom, it must be adding to that, must be providing value to them, or they just would rather be somewhere else. They work fine alone. This generation has spent a lot of time alone. They do just fine learning on their own. They're adaptable, they're resourceful, they're resilient. They also have an awareness of mental health and the importance of that, and social justice and community. Wouldn't we all like that balance? Yeah, we probably would. And our nation is one of the few nations that falls kind of low on those scales. Right? Most nations around the world have better work-life balance than we do in America. So these students really can go somewhere else. They don't have to stay here. We can thank them for extra paid leave or the maternity and paternity. Even now, the federal government does 6 weeks of paid maternity leave. So, I didn't have that just half a decade ago with, or so with my last child. So we see a lot of changes that are coming about due to the things that Generation Z values and what's coming ahead. I see it there. We have somebody who gave their own story. Students, if they can identify with your story, that absolutely helps them. So I have a first gen story that I share sometimes with students. But the trouble that we run into in the classroom is the students really do not need us to gain knowledge. They live in a world where Google has always existed. They literally do not have to go to the library or have an encyclopedia or look in a dictionary to get answers. So we must provide something beyond the basic knowledge. Now, when we tell them that, when we say we're going to be application and analysis, Bloom's level, they're like, oh my gosh, what's that? So present it differently. I know you can read the book. I know you're all very intelligent because you've gotten into the University of South Carolina. So I don't need to read the book to you. I expect you to do that on your own time. And when you come to class, we're going to practice what's in the book. We'll talk about how it affects your career. We're going to do actual things in a lab. And then if you really want to keep them on board, you must speak their language. Right? We've got to know our audience, speak their language. How do we do that? Here's some ways that we can speak their language. They desire a connection. They want you to connect with them, however. They do not want to connect with you. My students are less interested in my personal stories, but they're much greater interested in me explaining that I understand that this is a tough week. I know there's a lot going on. It's midterm week. You're really stressed. So what I can do for you, and then provide them something. It does not have to be much. You can bring candy and hand it out in class. You can say, what I'm going to provide for you is I gave you 4 points that you needed to do for that essay. I'll remove 1. You only need to pick 3 of the 4. It's something minor. And if you plan it, you can put 4 points in there ahead of time knowing you're going to remove 1. It's okay to have a strategy in our own classroom for how we're going to get students engaged. Give them a lot of work and then take some of it away because you're empathizing with them and you know they're stressed. You're buying some of that goodwill. They desire understanding. They want to understand what is happening and why. They want to understand why they need to learn it. It's okay to just give them a literal statement and say why. You don't have to play a game with them. You don't have to hide it. Just say, this is why it's important. This is why we learned this. This is why you need to know this later. Relate it back to your learning objective for the class. They expect fairness. So you need to prepare them for failure. I have to constantly tell my students In strategy, there's not always a right and wrong. There's usually an okay, that's a little bit better, and that was the best option there. But there's not always a right and wrong. There are wrong answers, but usually when we hit those ethical, egregious errors, we're way off track for what you should be submitting. But they are going to expect all kinds of fairness in every aspect of life. So you need to prepare them for things not to be fair, prepare them to fail, request that they get things wrong. Tell them you really give extra credit for wrong answers if they're vocalized in class, because that is when students learn. When a peer says something that everybody else knows is probably not right, all of a sudden all the attention has just returned to you and the topic in class. So give extra credit for wrong answers. Technology is expected. You must have technology integrated. If you really are just against it being in the classroom, then integrate it into your homework or some sort of assignment that can be turned in later. However, you must appear knowledgeable about the technology. Even if you're not, fake it. Fake it till you make it. Technology they've had since they literally could walk, and they do not understand why anyone would not understand technology today. So if you're really just not interested in it, then fake it, but appear knowledgeable and integrate it somehow into your course, even if you do it on the outside of your class time deliverables. They want fun and collaboration. So they're a lonely group. They're more lonely than we've had in previous generations. So they also are not as adept at collaboration because they've had more social interaction online than they have in person. So collaboration inside the classroom, they really enjoy that. When they are doing many activities in class and 3 or 4 folks are getting to talk, they really find that interesting. If you can keep your content in the middle of that conversation and make sure you're timing things right so it's not going to Friday night's conversation. But social media is a great thing to do. Scavenger hunts. You can do scavenger hunts within the classroom, around the building, throughout the week. Dismiss a class. Hold them for 15 minutes and send them out. And then at the next class period, you go over what the findings were. They can submit everything through Blackboard. You can review it before they show up in class. It's great. So have fun, collaboration, and that just would have integrated technology. Inclusivity is also expected. They have had K-12 education like we've never seen it before. If you've not been into a K-12 classroom in the last decade, go visit your local elementary school. The classrooms are not quiet. Everybody is not sitting in chairs and desks in lines and rows anymore. There's groups, there's centers, there's 4 groups, there's 4 desks together. When you go into the room, everybody's working, everybody's doing something. They are not all doing the same thing. There's accommodations in the classroom that are available to everyone. And these students have grown up in this. Since they were 4 years old, they've had technology devices, iPads, laptops in their classrooms. They've had teachers who have teacher helpers rotating in and out. Inclusion just completely changed the way elementary schools are run. And so these students are quite used to being engaged and entertained at all times. At all times. They expect the same from your classroom. It needs to be fun. It needs to be active. It needs to be engaging. If you are giving a lecture or you are doing something that requires them to sit and be stationary, then provide them a handout that they have to go fill out so that their mind is active. If you're at a loss, you should ask them. Generation Z is very forthcoming, and they will tell you anything that you've asked them. You can do a survey, you can do pictorial activities, anything that you'd like for them to know. So they are changing the workforce. We've not seen that with previous generations, but with the last end of the millennials and Gen Z, we see the workforce changing because there's a need. Employers have to hire these folks, and they are very adamant. They set their boundaries, they hold them well, and they're not going to give. They'll just change jobs. They'll go home and live with mom and dad for a little while if they need to get that work-life balance back. Employers are not going to convince them to be the America of the 1990s. So you're not going to convince them to be that pupil that you had 20 years ago. We need to engage them in a way that K-12 has taught them is what education is. And that's active, busy, options, choices. So here are some things that they don't know, just to give you an idea. right? And you can get online and look for this, and there's all kinds of fun and humorous ones. But they don't know what roll down windows are. They didn't know that cars used to have to roll down windows. My son literally did not know what the crank on the door was when we were at someone's house, and he'd never seen that. Didn't know what it was. A Rolodex, if I talk about Rolodexes in class, I often do church pew analogies. Students don't understand religious analogies or the significance behind people not liking change. I used to say, well, people don't like change. It's like if you show up on Sunday morning and you sit in somebody's seat in the church pew, 90% of my students don't know what I'm talking about. Rolodex, they have no idea what it is, and it's great. I do it every semester. I love listening to their idea of what that is because I don't allow them to look it up. They just have to say, what do you think that word is? And then when they find out what it is, they're just so shocked. There's a lot of phrases they don't understand, like let sleeping dogs lie, what's the beef, right? We've seen a rise in autism spectrum, ADHD in our classrooms, and a lot of these students are very literal people. And so let sleeping dogs lie, they think you're talking about a dog. And what's the beef? They don't remember that's before their time. So need to be sensitive to these things. All right, some things that they struggle with: mental health, depression, anxiety, stress, and loneliness. These are things that the pandemic exacerbated for them at a time when they weren't yet fully formed mentally and emotionally. So this is a real struggle for them, as it is for everyone right now around the world, but they're our youngest group of folks, and there's often times that I can just see the stress in my class. And I have on 2 different occasions over the last couple of years just stopped class. Okay, you're stressed. We're not doing anything else. It's about what's going on. And we just went through what's going on. Oh, you got 5 classes, you got 5 midterms. All right, well, let's help you figure that out. And we have the whole class help problem solve, and we solve a couple of students' issues. What it does is it lets the students know that you're investing in them. It goes back to that bullet point we had about they want you to know them, to you to invest in them, you to care about them. And so that's one of the biggest ways. We can learn this content later. Right now, today, what's your problem? Why can't you focus? We have alarming amount of depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation. It's all there, every bit of it. And it's all through high schools. It's all in colleges. And colleges have always been the age where your personality disorders and a lot of emotional mental health issues come out because of stress. For the first time, people are stressed. And we see that now, and the stress is even greater. All right, syllabus statements. I tell them, be just upfront, to the point, relay to them what they need to know. We are all adults. I tell them in my classroom, I'm going off your legal age, and you're an adult. The responsibility for you to learn in my class is not just mine. It is my responsibility to teach you in a way that is engaging to the majority of folks. But it is your responsibility to show up, having slept, having had your cup of coffee, with your notebook, and ready to learn. That's not my responsibility. Keys to success. I give them, the keys to my class. Time management is going to be important. We do a full semester long project in most of the classes that I teach. For communication with the professor, I expect that you communicate with me. I don't read minds. I surely cannot read 500 minds. So if you have something going on, I need to know about it. Doesn't mean I can do anything for you, but I want to know because I might can. Active participation. I expect that you read, you learn, and you listen. And I expect most of that's done before you arrive to my classroom. Because when we get into class, we're going to start doing things. I give them examples, and I walk them through it. I hold their hands for 2 weeks, and then I tell them I'm not going to be holding their hands anymore. And I give them 1 or 2 more days of it. Questioning strategies, discussion strategies, games, all right? These are things that you probably already do. I saw a lot of Kahoots. I saw some word clouds, right? So when you do those things, it's very obvious to the student that you're doing something that you intend to be engaging. But question strategies, students don't know you're doing that. A discussion strategy, they don't know that you're doing that. They have no idea. They think you're just asking questions. So I have started sharing my question strategies with the class. And I'll tell them ahead of time, today's class is going to be this. This is what we're going to do. Or next week, we're going to do this. So prepare for that when you come back on Tuesday. And now I get so much better engagement with my questioning because they know the purpose behind it, right? If they know what they're supposed to do and they know what's expected of them, they will give. So here's the kicker on Gen Z. They're only going to study and learn what you're going to test them on. It goes back to that work-life balance. It necessitates efficiency for them. So if you're not testing it, they're not studying it. Typically, we're told, know your audience, keep assessment in mind, have evidence of knowledge somehow, have evidence of application somehow. What I want to encourage you to do is different. Know who you are. Be true to who you are. Do something that you find fun so that you are engaging and lively in class. If you don't find it fun, then it cannot be fun to teach. If you don't find it fun as an activity, then it cannot be fun to do as an activity in class. So they will engage with you more and connect with you more when you are engaged. Provide a roadmap. Tell them exactly what you're going to do and exactly where you're going to go and exactly what you need them to do. Challenge them. Give them examples from the careers. Here's what you're going to need to do with this in about 6 months or 2 years, whatever class you're in. Give them poor examples. Ask them to go find good examples. They're much harder to find. So you give the poor examples, ask them to find good ones, right? Plant a couple of poor examples in class. Give extra credit. I need you to say this when I ask a question today, right? Get some folks to start saying some things in class that maybe you're not right, so that you have the ability to go through that and sort through it in class with them and get engaged in thinking at different levels. Enrichment time. These students want enrichment. They can get the knowledge on their own. They can read the book on their own. They want enrichment in class. So if you've never had time to do that, put everything else out. Whatever you were doing, put it away. Don't do that anymore. Do the enrichment in class instead. Give whatever your other roadmap was to them as notes for study notes and let them do it on their own. They want enrichment in the classroom. Forced investment. Create their own. If you cannot get them invested, give them the ability to create their own. So my students design their entire projects. I don't give them a project topic. I give them things that they have to have as deliverables and certain content from the rubric content assessments that have to be in there. But they design their own project in all of my classes. I don't design their projects. As a class, we create a rubric, but then what they do and what they turn in and how it's done, they give me all of that information, and then I grade them against their own rubric. I also allow students to make their own test questions, create their own test questions. And because students don't create the best test questions, right, I put them out there in Blackboard for them to see. There may be 50 questions that come in from the class or 100 questions. I put them all out there with the answers that the students provided, the correct ones, of course. And most of them are correct, actually. And then I'll select a few of them and put them on their test, right? So they enjoy being part of the class. It's an experience. They enjoy being part of that experience. So when, where, and why, and how do you begin? So this is a reminder of reflection, keeping those goals close. But the most important thing is you just need to start. Start somewhere and then do your assessment cycle. Get feedback on how it went. Make corrections the next time. But just start. It's okay to not do well. If we want our students to give wrong answers in class because that helps learn, then we need to be willing to take the risk of something not going well and saying, that didn't go how I wanted it. How did it work for you, students? What could we do to make this better for next semester's students? Peer-to-peer assessments. They value what their peers think of them, sometimes more than what we think of them. Improvement, grade them on improvement. Do a before and after. Communication effectiveness. How well can they explain it to other people? That's a skill they need later. Not the knowledge, not that you get these 10 points, but how well can you explain it and communicate it? Choices, decisions. How well did they make a decision? Choices matter. A lot of our students don't know that because their parents have spent a lot of time getting them out of things. So how did the decisions matter? What decisions did they make? Did they fit? Did it fit the solution? So you want to begin, and the different ways of assessment. If you're going to teach differently, if you want different interaction in your classroom, you must assess differently. You cannot change how you teach without changing how you assess. And there are all types of creative assessments. These are 5 that I've used personally. So that's all I had for today. If you have questions, I'll hang around for a few minutes